Last week I got to visit Tivoli Friheden in Aarhus here in Denmark for the first ever time, and this was the last park in all of Denmark I needed to visit. I've now visited all of our 9 theme parks operating. That also means I got to ride the last major coasters in the country that I haven't ridden yet. One of those coasters is Cobra, and this is an incredibly infamous ride. Cobra is a Sartori Rides Energizer, and it's the only one of its kind. And I'll just say right off the bat, there are definitely reasons that this is the only one of its kind. Sartori Rides is a manufacturer mostly known for small rides for traveling fairs, maybe a few wacky worms, as well as then spinning wild mouse coasters, but they have never been known to make what they did at Tivoli Friheden. Cobra is their only looping inverted coaster, anything of this level at all they've made, and you can definitely tell when you're riding it that they were not the most experienced with this. It's also the only inverted looping coaster in Denmark, and as I said, it's incredibly infamous. Among all the thrill coasters in Denmark, this is definitely the black sheep, and there are several reasons to this. First of all, it opened back in 2008, and only about a week after it opened, it already had an accident. And in the modern amusement industry, it is the worst roller coaster accident we've ever had in Denmark. One of the cars derailed, and while no one was killed, there were still 4 people injured, and the ride was standing but not operating until May of 2009. This was a pretty serious accident, especially considering it happened a week after it opened, and that's already a big red flag from Sartori Rides that this thing should just not have been built by that company. And I think it's one of the reasons that none have been built since then, because that accident has just left a big scar on the company. Of course, also the ride experience itself is also a reason, and we'll get into that shortly. First of all though, the ride stands 68.9 feet tall, it's 1,312.3 feet long, and it goes 40.4 miles an hour. So it is not a very big and fast ride. It's rather compact considering some of the elements that are on this ride. It's got 3 inversions, only 10 riders per train, which is an incredibly low number for a looping coaster, and the ride also only lasts 28 seconds from the lift hill to the final brake run. Now as always, I quickly want to cover how this ride looks. First of all, there's not really any theming to look at per se. Really the only piece of theming on this coaster at all are the trains, which are actually pretty decently themed to, well, a Cobra. The ride itself looks pretty alright as well. When I went there, it had been raining for most of the day, and if you've been to a theme park in the rain, you know that a lot of the rides often saturate a little more in their color, so the ride actually looked pretty well there. But as soon as it dried up, I saw its true colors, and yeah, it's very faded in the color. The orange is very faded, but otherwise it's still a pretty cool color scheme. The track doesn't look too bad, but at the same time it still looks kind of sketchy, and it certainly is one of the sketchiest coasters I've ever ridden. Let me take you through the ride experience. You start by sitting down in the train in the station, and well, already here it's actually a good first impression because the seats are incredibly soft. They're very cushiony, and so are the over-the-shoulder restraints. So any headbanging you might get on this ride could definitely have been worse. After you traverse the chain lift hill, you go down this twisted drop, and already here you can see how amateurish this ride is designed. The first drop feels pretty awkward in that it already begins turning quite sharply before it starts banking. The drop itself though is actually pretty solid. In the front you're not really going to experience much, but in the back you're going to get some smooth laterals in the beginning, and that was actually pretty solid. At the bottom of the drop you'll start to feel some solid forces, and I really mean solid forces. Then you go into the Immelman loop, which I would say is probably the most forceful part of the ride throughout most of the train. The park's website says that this coaster hits 4.5 Gs, but I'm not even gonna lie, I think it might be a little more than that. It feels incredibly forceful. So that's one big positive of this ride already. It is not a forceless looping coaster. The exit of the Immelman though, well, yeah, this is where it's kind of sketchy again. It's so oddly shaped. It takes forever for the track to unbank, so you kind of just hang awkwardly on the side on the way down. But for some reason, because of the roughness that is also there, which I will get into a little later, you don't really get any hang time here. And it's actually the same thing when you go into the Cobra roll. You see, the entrance to the Cobra roll once again is super forceful, but then it slows down incredibly much up at the top to the point where, yeah, you would usually definitely feel hang time, but the roughness kind of takes away from it. It's very weird. The Cobra roll is not very whippy, but again, the entrance is forceful and the exit is also super forceful, especially in the back row. That's where it's probably the most forceful, and it's very reminiscent of like a Pinfari Cyclone drop in the back, except it's positive forces instead of airtime. Basically, you're just gonna get yanked through the exit of this Cobra roll if you sit in the back, and it's pretty fun. After that, the ride sort of dies. Again, it becomes very Pinfari Cyclone-ish here, and that is overall what I would compare this coaster the most to. But yeah, you go up this hill, and then you move into a 540-degree helix. The bottom of the helix, you're gonna feel a little bit of G-force, but it's only like 2 Gs, I think. It's barely anything. After the helix, you hit some almost very unnecessary trim brakes, and then you have a turnaround into the final brake run. So it is a very short ride, but the first half of it really packs a punch. Now, how smooth is Cobra? It's not. Cobra is one of the roughest coasters I've been on. It is very headbangy, and it has a few points of the ride that really jackhammer you. But again, the seats and the over-the-shoulder restraints are quite cushiony and very soft, so it doesn't really hurt that bad. It's kind of funny how bad it is when you ride it. It's not like you can't bear it, and I mean, I did ride this coaster more than once when I was there, but it's certainly not good either. Let me just point out some of the points that really jackhammer you. The bottom of the drop, jackhammering. The valley between the Immelman and the Cobra roll, jackhammering. The roughest part of the ride is actually the middle of the Cobra roll between the two half corkscrews. The banking is very awkward, it unbanks way too much, and that just gives you a massive jolt. That is the roughest part of the ride, and that's the only place where it actually hurts. After that is actually just more some casual shaking. The helix is rough, but it's definitely not painful in any way. It's very much the first half that is the most rough. And that's actually kind of funny because the first half is the best in regards to forces, it's the most intense, and it's also the most rough. The second part of the ride is really just everything toned down. So overall, yeah, that is the experience you get at Cobra. It's a very weird coaster. It feels incredibly awkward and sketchy. It's both very intense, but also kind of dead. This is just an overall really weird inverted looping coaster. But do I like it? I guess somewhat. I like it more than the Pinfari Cyclone I've ridden, because even though these two models are incredibly different, the ride experience is very similar. Cobra feels like everything a looping Pinfari Cyclone stands for, but enhanced. You know, it's more forceful, but it's also more rough. It has some very quick and powerful amounts of forces. It's just positive forces instead of airtime. It feels just as sketchy. There are so many similarities. And I think what we can really learn from that is just that Italian thrill coasters are kind of sketchy. Overall, I still think it's a fun ride. It is in my top 5 rides in the park, and I would ride it again for sure when I go there. Because even though it is super rough, it's not to the point where, oh no, I'm never gonna ride this again. It's not unbearable. It's annoying, and that one point in the Cobra roll actually hurts, but it's not enough for me to not ride it again. And this is also a ride that really makes me curious to ride an SLC again, because I haven't ridden an SLC in years, and I honestly forgot how they feel. I don't know my actual opinion on SLCs. Their placement in my rankings is kind of weird because I don't really know where to put them. So considering I can still bear the roughness of this ride and still enjoy it, I really want to ride an SLC again. That sounds weird, but I do. So if you've ridden Cobra, please let me know what you think of it in the comments below. And if you haven't ridden it and you're out of your goddamn mind and want to ride it, let me know what you think of it beforehand in the comments. Otherwise, I want to wish you a goddamn happy ass weekend or week. I don't know when you're watching this. And well, bye!